My hands were steady on that wheel. They had to be. Behind me, 37 souls sat in silence, waiting to see if we'd make it through the next 10 seconds alive. The 18-wheeler had jackknifed across Peachtree Street, its trailer swinging like a pendulum of death, and I had maybe 3 heartbeats to decide: slam the brakes and let 40,000 pounds of metal crush us from behind, or thread this 40-foot bus through a gap that looked narrower than my faith. I chose faith. The screech of my tires harmonized with someone's prayer in the back. I felt the bus lunge slightly, just enough to make my stomach drop, as I cranked the wheel hard right. The smell of burning rubber filled my nostrils. In my peripheral vision, I saw the trailer's edge pass so close to my window that I could read the rust on its bolts. Then we were through, and I was easing off the gas, pulling to the curb like I'd just completed the most ordinary task in the world. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then chaos. Passengers rushed forward, their voices overlapping. A young man in scrubs was filming me with his phone, his hand shaking so badly the image had to be a blur. An elderly woman pressed her palm against my shoulder, saying something in Spanish that I didn't understand but felt in my bones. And Lisa, sweet Lisa, with her long locks and nursing textbooks, she was crying, actually crying, saying Miss Evelyn, over and over like a prayer. "It's all right, baby," I told them, though my own voice sounded strange to my ears, distant. Everybody all right back there. But I knew this moment would change everything. I knew because I'd seen the look in Marcus Whitfield's eyes 3 weeks ago when he told me I was a liability. I knew because at 63 years old and 30 years behind this wheel, I'd become invisible to everyone except the people who needed me most. I knew because in America, a black woman with gray hair and working hands is always one mistake away from becoming disposable. Only I hadn't made a mistake. I'd saved 37 lives. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't know, with his expensive suits and his MBA and his spreadsheets that reduced human beings to numbers, was that I'd been driving these streets since before he learned to tie his shoes. I knew every pothole, every blind corner, every place where the sun hit your mirrors, just wrong at 4 p.m. I knew the rhythm of this city's heartbeat because I'd been carrying its people through their lives for 3 decades. I'd driven women to the hospital in labor, men to their last days at work before retirement, children to their first days at school. And now they wanted me gone. The phone cameras were still recording when I pulled back into traffic, my hands no longer steady, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. In the rearview mirror, I caught my own eyes, brown and tired and afraid. I made myself a promise. This story wasn't going to end with me disappearing quietly into some government check retirement while Marcus congratulated himself on modernizing the fleet. If they wanted me gone, they'd have to see me first. What city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. People think driving a bus is simple. You pick folks up, you drop them off, you collect your paycheck at the end of the week. They think it's just steering and braking, just following a route that somebody else mapped out for you. They think wrong. I learned that truth on my very first day, 30 years ago, when I climbed into the driver's seat with my brand new commercial license and my heart full of pride. The old-timer who trained me, a man named Roosevelt who'd been driving since the 70s, he sat in the passenger seat and watched me for exactly 5 minutes before he spoke. "You ain't driving a bus, Evelyn," he said, his voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes. "You're carrying people's whole lives. That woman in the 3rd row, she's going to a job interview that could change everything for her family. That boy in the back, first time riding alone, and his mama's worried sick. You see that man with the cane? He's going to physical therapy because he refused to let a stroke take his independence. Every single person on this bus is in the middle of their story, and you're responsible for making sure they get to the next chapter." I never forgot that. Not once, in 30 years. My route was the 47 from the south side through downtown, past the Martin Luther King Jr. historic site, through Sweet Auburn, all the way to the northern suburbs where the houses got bigger and the people got quieter. It was a route that carried the whole spectrum of Atlanta in its seats: domestics heading to their employers' homes, students heading to Georgia Tech, nurses finishing night shifts at Grady Hospital, men in suits who'd missed the express and settled for my slower ride. I learned their faces, learned their stops. Mrs. Patterson got on at 6:15 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, always dressed in church clothes even though she was just going to clean somebody else's house. I always gave her a few extra seconds to settle herself before I pulled away from the curb. Carlos, 16 years old, earbuds always in. I watched him grow from a scrawny freshman to a senior heading to Morehouse. He never said much, but every morning he'd give me a small nod, and I'd nod back. That was our conversation. And Lisa Carter started riding my bus 3 years ago, when she began her nursing program. She always sat in the same spot, 4th row. Window seat 10. She'd study her flashcards the whole ride, her lips moving silently as she memorized medications and procedures. Sometimes she'd look up and catch me watching her in the mirror, and she'd smile, this bright, brilliant smile that reminded me why I loved this work. These were my people. This was my church, my community, my purpose. My son Samuel didn't understand that. He loved me, Lord knows he loved me, but he didn't understand. Ma, you've been doing this for 30 years, he'd say, usually during Sunday dinner at his place, his voice careful like he was approaching a skittish animal. Don't you think it's time to rest, enjoy yourself, travel somewhere? Travel. The word always made me want to laugh. Travel where? To do what? Sit in some hotel room watching TV I could watch at home. Stand in front of monuments and take pictures to show to who? Samuel had his life, his wife, his auto shop, his poker nights with the guys. He had his purpose. This bus was mine. Baby, I am enjoying myself. I'd tell him, I like my work. I'm good at it. I know you're good at it. But you're 63. You've earned the right to slow down. What he meant, what he'd never say out loud, was that he worried about me, worried about my knees, which ached on cold mornings, worried about my blood pressure, which my doctor watched like a hawk, worried about the diabetes that made me check my sugar before every shift. He worried because he was a good son, and good sons worry about their aging mothers. But I wasn't ready to become someone who needed worrying about, not yet. The morning, everything changed, started like every other morning. I woke at 4:45 a.m., same as always, made my coffee black, 2 sugars, and toasted a piece of wheat bread with a thin scrape of margarine. I took my medications with the last of the coffee, checked my blood sugar 118, good, and laid out my uniform, navy blue pants, light blue button-down shirt, black shoes with non-slip soles. I'd been wearing this uniform so long, I could probably put it on in my sleep. The station was already humming when I arrived at 5:30, buses pulling in and out, drivers checking their vehicles, the dispatcher's voice crackling over the radio. I did my pre-trip inspection the way Roosevelt taught me: tires, lights, mirrors, horn, brakes, doors. I checked the fire extinguisher and the first aid kit. I made sure the wheelchair lift was working. Nothing fancy, nothing rushed, just the work. I was filling out my logbook when Derek, one of the younger drivers, slid into the seat next to me in the break room. You hear about the meeting? He asked, his voice low. What meeting? Company-wide, this afternoon. They sent an email last night. I didn't check my email much. Never saw the point. If they needed me, they could call. What's it about? I asked, though something in my stomach had already started to knot. Derek shrugged, but his eyes told me he knew more than he was saying. Management changes, new director. The words sat heavy in the air between us. Our old director, Mr. Peterson, had retired 6 months ago. He was a good man, fair. He remembered people's names, asked about their families. Under him, you felt like you mattered as more than just a body in a seat. But the company had been sold to some investment group from New York, and investment groups didn't care about things like names and families. They cared about margins. You worried? Derek asked. I thought about lying. Then I thought about Roosevelt, who'd told me once that honesty was the only currency that never devalued. Yeah, I said, I'm worried, but I went out and drove my route anyway, because that's what you do. You show up. You do the work. You trust that if you do everything right, if you're professional and skilled and dedicated, that will be enough. I should have known better. In this country, when you're black and aging and female, doing everything right is never quite enough. Marcus Whitfield arrived like a storm nobody predicted. The meeting was held in the main garage at 3 p.m., and every driver and mechanic and dispatcher crowded in, curious and anxious in equal measure. We stood between buses, our voices echoing off the concrete walls, and waited. When Marcus walked in, I understood immediately what we were dealing with. He was younger than I expected. I'd later learn, with skin the color of pecan shells and a beard trimmed so precisely it looked drawn on. His suit probably cost more than I made in a month, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. and his shoes had that mirror shine you only get with expensive leather and professional maintenance. He carried a tablet instead of papers, and his smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. Behind him came a woman in a matching suit, some consultant or HR person whose name I immediately forgotten. Two men in polo shirts with the company's new logo embroidered on the chest. The logo had changed. I noticed, sleeker, more corporate. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. He had that particular kind of authority that came from business schools and boardrooms, the kind that expected obedience without having to earn it. "I want to thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to be here. I know this shift change is inconvenient for some of you, but I promise to be brief." Shift change, as if we'd rearranged our lives out of convenience rather than mandate. As you know, Atlanta Metro Transit has undergone some organizational changes. The previous ownership made the difficult decision to sell to Meridian Transit Solutions, and I've been brought in as your new director of operations. He paused, letting that title sink in. I come from a background in logistics and efficiency optimization. I've worked with transit systems in Chicago, Denver, and Charlotte, and my job here is simple: to modernize this fleet and bring our operations into the 21st century. Modernize. That word again. It was a favorite word of people like Marcus, people who looked at systems that had been working for decades and saw only opportunities for disruption. "Now, I know change can be uncomfortable," he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd without really seeing any of us. "But change is also necessary. The transportation industry is evolving rapidly. We're facing increased competition from ride-sharing services, pressure to reduce emissions, demands for better technology and customer service. To survive, to thrive, we need to adapt." I watched him as he talked, noting the way he gestured with one hand while the other stayed in his pocket, the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He spoke about efficiency metrics and performance standards, about route optimization and fleet renewal. He threw around phrases like customer experience enhancement and operational excellence. What he didn't talk about was people. "There are going to be some changes moving forward," Marcus said, and now his voice took on a different tone, something harder beneath the professional polish. "We'll be implementing new evaluation systems. Every driver will be assessed on multiple criteria: punctuality, customer complaints, safety record, vehicle condition," and he paused meaningfully, "physical capability and response time." Physical capability, there it was. I felt Derek stiffen beside me. Around us, I could hear the shift in the room's energy, the way 100 people simultaneously realized this wasn't just a meet and greet with the new boss. "Over the next several weeks, each of you will participate in updated training modules and physical assessments. This is standard procedure, nothing to be concerned about. We simply need to ensure that every member of our team is capable of meeting the demands of modern transit operation." His smile widened, showing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "Think of it as a chance to prove yourselves, to show that you're ready for Atlanta Metro Transit's next chapter." The meeting lasted another 20 minutes, but I barely heard the rest. Physical assessments, prove ourselves. I'd been proving myself for 30 years, every single day. And apparently that counted for nothing. When Marcus finally dismissed us, I didn't rush for the door like some of the others. I stayed in place, watching as he gathered his tablet and conferred with his suited colleagues. I wanted to see if he'd talk to any of us, if he'd make any effort to actually meet the people whose lives he'd just turned upside down. He didn't. He walked out the way he came in, surrounded by his people, protected from having to touch the world he was about to rearrange. "Evelyn," I turned to find Tom Rodriguez, one of the senior mechanics. He'd been with the company even longer than me, 43 years, and his face showed every one of them. "You caught that, right?" he said quietly. "Physical assessments, I caught it. They're going after the old-timers." His voice was matter-of-fact, but I could see the fear in his eyes, trying to force us out without having to pay real retirement packages. "You don't know that for sure, don't I?" He shook his head. "I've seen this before, Evelyn. New management comes in, wants to make their mark. Easiest way to cut costs is to get rid of the experienced workers. We make too much money, we have too many protections. So they create these new standards, make them just hard enough that people our age can't quite meet them, and suddenly we're the problem instead of the solution." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to believe that competence and dedication and 30 years of perfect service would mean something. But I'd lived in America too long to be that naive. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then, Same thing I've always done, show up and do the work. Make them fire me if that's what they want. I'm not going to make it easy for them. I nodded. It was the only answer either of us had that evening. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea going cold in front of me and thought about the math. I was 63. My official retirement age was 64 more years. I had 4 more years before I could claim my full pension. 4 more years before I could walk away on my own terms with dignity intact. But Marcus Whitfield wasn't going to give me 4 years. I'd seen it in the way he looked at the room, or rather, didn't look at the room. We were just obstacles to him, impediments to his vision of a modernized, efficient, profitable operation. My phone rang. Samuel. Double quotes. Hey ma, you okay? Word traveled fast in our community. Somebody's cousin or nephew or friend probably worked at the depot and had already spread the news. I'm fine, baby. I heard about the new director, about the assessments. It's nothing to worry about, ma. His voice was gentle but firm. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe it's time to. Don't, I interrupted. Please don't. Silence on the line. Then, I just don't want you to get hurt. I know, but I need you to trust me on this. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. Another silence. Finally, okay, but I'm here if you need me. Whatever you need. After we hung up, I sat in the dark and let myself feel it, the fear, the anger, the bone-deep exhaustion of having to fight just to keep doing the job I was good at. I let myself feel it for exactly 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, laid out my uniform for the next day, and went to bed. Because that's what you do. You feel it, you acknowledge it, and then you get up and drive the bus. The assessments began the following Monday. They started with the youngest drivers, first a strategic choice that I recognized immediately. Let the 20-somethings and 30-somethings breeze through the tests, set the baseline, establish the standards. By the time they got to those of us with gray hair and reading glasses, the bar would already be set impossibly high. I watched it happen over 2 weeks. Drivers would disappear for half a day, come back tight-lipped and tense. Some passed, some didn't. Martin Thompson, 58 years old, 23 years of service, failed the vision test. Never mind that he'd been driving without incident for over 2 decades. Never mind that he'd never had a single accident, never received a single complaint. The new standards required 20/40ths vision in both eyes without correction, and Martin's left eye was 20/50ths with his glasses. He was gone within 3 days. Voluntary retirement, they called it, though there was nothing voluntary about it. Then came Shirley Davis, 60 years old, arthritis in her knees. The physical assessment required drivers to evacuate a bus through the rear emergency exit, crawl out the window, basically in under 45 seconds. Shirley made it in 2 seconds. 30 years of experience erased by 2 seconds. She didn't even clean out her locker, just left her uniform on her chair and walked out, and nobody saw her again. The fear in the depot was palpable now. People stopped making eye contact in the break room. Conversations died when supervisors walked past. We were all waiting for our names to be called, all wondering if we'd be next. My assessment was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I spent the morning driving my route, trying to focus on the work, on the people who depended on me. But my mind kept drifting to those tests. To Martin's failed vision and Shirley's 47 seconds. Lisa got on at her usual stop, her backpack heavy with textbooks. She sat in her usual seat and pulled out her flashcards, but I caught her watching me in the reflection of the window. Miss Evelyn, she called out after a few minutes. You all right? I met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Just tired, baby. Long morning. My grandmother always said tired is just fear wearing a different coat. I had to smile at that. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She drove a bus in Birmingham, back in the 60s, during the boycotts. Lisa leaned forward in her seat. She told me once that the hardest part wasn't the white folks who cursed at her or spit at her. It was the fear that one day she'd wake up and they'd have one, that she'd have let them make her small. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, and Lisa nodded back, and we understood each other without needing to say more. The assessment took place in a training facility on the west side, a large warehouse that had been converted into a testing ground. When I arrived, I was met by a young woman with a clipboard who introduced herself as Jennifer, one of Marcus's new hires. She had that eager efficiency of recent college graduates, bright and ready to prove herself. Mrs. Johnson, thank you for coming. We'll be conducting a series of evaluations today to ensure you meet our updated standards for driver certification. She spoke like she was reading from a script. First, we'll do a vision screening. then a physical assessment, then a driving simulation. The whole process should take about 3 hours. Do you have any questions? No, Mom. The vision test was first. I sat in a chair and read letters off a chart, covered one eye and then the other, tracked a moving light. My heart hammered the whole time, but my eyes, thank God, 20/30ths in both eyes with my reading glasses. I passed. The physical assessment was next. Jennifer led me to a mock-up of a bus interior and explained the requirements. I needed to demonstrate that I could evacuate through 3 different emergency exits, perform CPR on a training dummy, and lift and carry a 50-pound weight representing a passenger's luggage. 20 feet, I'm not going to lie, was hard. My knees protested when I climbed through the rear window. My arms shook when I compressed the dummy's chest for 2 minutes straight. The weight felt like it doubled halfway through the 20-foot carry, but I did it. Every single task, completed within the required time limits. Jennifer marked her clipboard, her face neutral. Good. Now, for the driving simulation. This was the part I'd been dreading. The simulation put you in a computer-generated environment and threw scenarios at you pedestrians, stepping into the street. Cars running red lights, mechanical failures. It tested your reaction time, your decision-making, your ability to handle crisis situations. I climbed into the simulator seat, adjusted the mirrors, and placed my hands on the wheel. The screen lit up with a familiar view. Downtown Atlanta, morning rush hour. Jennifer's voice came through a speaker. Begin when you're ready, Mrs. Johnson. I pressed the gas pedal for 20 minutes. That simulator threw everything at me. A child chasing a ball into the street, a drunk driver swerving into my lane, a mechanical brake failure going downhill, a passenger having a medical emergency. Every crisis, every split-second decision, every test of my 30 years of experience compressed into 20 minutes of digital nightmare. And I passed every one. When it was over, when the screen went dark and the simulation ended, I sat in that chair and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Pride, not arrogance, not overconfidence, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd proven what I already knew about myself. Jennifer studied her clipboard for a long moment. Then she looked up at me, and something in her expression had changed. The eagerness was gone, replaced by something more complicated. Congratulations, Mrs. Johnson. You've passed all components of the assessment. I closed my eyes briefly. Thank you. You should be proud. Your scores were... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Double quotes, ... exceptional. Particularly for someone with your years of service. There it was again, that qualifier. For someone like you, for someone your age. I've been doing this a long time, I said evenly. Yes, you have. Jennifer glanced at the door, then back at me, and her voice dropped slightly. Mrs. Johnson, can I speak candidly? I nodded. I've been administering these assessments for 2 weeks now. I've seen 53 drivers come through. You're in the top 5 scores overall, top 3 in the simulation. She hesitated. But I want you to understand something. Passing these tests, it's not the end. Mr. Whitfield is implementing ongoing evaluations, monthly performance reviews, quarterly He's building a case. A case for what? For renewal, for transition, for SHE stopped, clearly struggling with how much to say. Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but my grandmother was a bus driver too, in Detroit, and when they forced her out, she... Jennifer shook her head. Just watch your back, okay? Don't give them any reason. I left that facility with my certification papers in hand, and Jennifer's warning in my heart. I'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. That night, I dreamed about Roosevelt. He was sitting in the passenger seat of my bus, ancient and impossibly solid, smoking one of his forbidden cigarettes. You remember what I told you? He asked. First day, about carrying people's lives. That's right, and I told you something else too. You remember? I thought back to that day, 30 years ago, a young woman eager to prove herself. You said there'd be days when the job tried to make me small, when people tried to convince me I was just a driver, just a number, just a body in a seat. You said those were the days I had to remember what I was really doing. Roosevelt nodded, smoke curling around his weathered face. And what are you really doing, Evelyn? I'm carrying people's lives. That's right, and don't you forget it. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, you're carrying people's lives. That makes you essential. That makes you matter. When I woke, my cheeks were wet, and I wasn't sure if I'd been crying in my sleep or if the tears had come after. I touched the dampness and thought about the weight of being essential to the people who needed you while being disposable to the people who employed you. Then, I got up and put on my uniform, because that's what you do. The monthly evaluations started in October. They were supposed to be routine, Marcus said during another warehouse meeting, just a way to ensure consistency, to monitor performance, to maintain the high standards we'd all worked so hard to meet. He smiled when he said it, that practiced smile that had probably worked wonders in boardrooms and strategy sessions, but looked hollow under the fluorescent lights of a bus depot. He didn't say what he didn't need to say was that these evaluations were designed to fail us. Not all at once, not obviously enough to trigger a lawsuit, but slowly, death by 1,000 paper cuts. They started tracking everything. Every minute you were early or late to a stop, every passenger complaint, no matter how minor, every report from supervisors who suddenly appeared on our routes, clipboards in hand, watching us like hawks studying field mice. They installed GPS trackers in every bus, monitoring our speed, our braking patterns, our idle time. Big Brother wasn't watching anymore. Big Brother was in the driver's seat with us. I saw what it did to the other drivers. People who'd been confident and skilled suddenly became nervous, second-guessing every decision. Derek developed a stress rash on his neck. Maria started taking antacids like candy. Tommy, who'd been driving almost as long as me, had his first panic attack at 56 years old, and people kept disappearing. Raymond Johnson, no relation, gone, failed to maintain schedule during rush hour traffic. Never mind that the traffic was due to a water main break that had closed to major streets. Never mind that he'd called dispatch to report the situation. He was 8 minutes late to 3 stops, and 8 minutes was 8 minutes too many. Patricia will. Customer complaint. A passenger reported that she'd been rude when he tried to bring an unauthorized cooler on board. Patricia had explained the rule: no large containers without prior clearance. Security policy post 9/11 sand. The passenger had filed a complaint. One complaint shouldn't have mattered, except it did when management wanted it to matter. By November, we'd lost 17 drivers, 17 people with a combined 412 years of experience, gone. And Marcus was hiring replacements: younger people, cheaper people, people who didn't know Atlanta streets the way we did, who didn't know the passengers, who treated driving as just a job instead of a calling. The new drivers were fine. I want to be clear about that. They weren't the problem. Some of them were quite good, actually, but they didn't have what time gives you: the instinct, the feel, the accumulated wisdom of thousands of trips and millions of miles. They knew the route, but they didn't know the rhythm. I watched a new driver, a kid named Brandon, 24 years old, miss Mrs. Patterson's stop because he didn't recognize her slow walk from a block away. I always started slowing down when I saw her coming. Brandon didn't know to look for her, so he passed right by, and she had to wait another 30 minutes for the next bus. 30 minutes in the cold for a woman with arthritis because the driver didn't know his passengers. These were the invisible costs of Marcus's modernization. These were the things that didn't show up on his spreadsheets. I kept my head down and did everything right. I was never late. I never had complaints. I maintained my bus with the same care I'd shown for 30 years. When the supervisors appeared on my route, I smiled and nodded and drove with perfect precision. I gave them nothing, not a single thing they could use against me. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The confrontation came in mid-November, on a gray Tuesday that smelled like coming snow. I was in the break room, eating my lunch: a turkey sandwich and an apple. Same as always when Marcus walked in. He never came to the break room. Management had their own spaces, their own coffee machines, their own world separate from ours. Toddy made a show of getting coffee from our ancient machine, adding creamer, stirring slowly, small talk with a couple of the younger drivers, all very casual, very friendly. Then he turned to me. "Evelyn, you have a minute." Every head in the room swiveled. People knew what a casual request from Marcus meant. "Of course, Mr. Whitfield." "Great, my office." 5 minutes. He left before I could respond. The break room stayed silent for a beat. Then everyone started talking at once, their voices low and worried. I wrapped up the rest of my sandwich. I'd lost my appetite anyway, and headed to the administrative building. Marcus's office was on the second floor, all glass and chrome and modern furniture that looked uncomfortable by design. He sat behind a desk that was too large for the space, probably chosen specifically to intimidate. On the wall behind him hung a series of framed certificates and awards, a shrine to his own accomplishments. "Have a seat, Evelyn." He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat, keeping my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. "I wanted to touch base with you," he began, his tone friendly but his eyes calculating. See how you're adjusting to all the changes we've been implementing. Adjusting fine, Mr. Whitfield. Good. Your evaluation scores have been solid. No complaints from passengers. Good attendance record. He paused, letting that hang in the air. But I've been reviewing your file, and I have some concerns. Here it was. Concerns. Sir, you're 63 years old. Evelyn, you've been with the company for 30 years. That's quite a long time. I'm proud of my service, as you should be, but I have to think about risk management, about liability, about what's best for the company and for you. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, trying to project sincerity. I worry about the physical demands of this job on someone your age, the long hours, the stress, the responsibility. Have you thought about retirement? About taking some time to enjoy your golden years? Golden years, as if poverty and boredom were covered in gold leaf. I've thought about it, I said carefully, but I'm not ready to retire. I'm still fully capable of performing my duties. I'm sure you believe that, but belief and reality aren't always the same thing. He pulled a folder from his drawer. I've been looking at reaction time studies. The data shows that drivers over 60 have measurably slower response times than younger drivers. It's just biology, nothing personal. Mr. Whitfield, I passed all the assessments. I scored in the top 5 overall on one day. But these things change. Reflexes slow down. Vision deteriorates. Cognitive function declines. These are medical facts. I see my doctor regularly. I'm healthy. For now. But what happens when you're not? What happens if you have a health event while driving? A stroke, a heart attack, a diabetic episode? He held up a hand before I could respond. I know about your diabetes, Evelyn. It's in your medical file. You're managing it well currently. But that's another risk factor we have to consider. My diabetes, my private medical information, now being used as a weapon against me. Sir, with all due respect, I've been managing my condition for 15 years without incident. It hasn't affected my work performance in any way, yet. It hasn't affected your work yet. He closed the folder, his expression grave. Look, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I'm trying to protect you, protect the company, protect our passengers. Maybe it's time to think about transitioning to a different role, something less demanding. We might be able to find you a position in dispatch or administration. I'm a driver, I interrupted. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. Marcus sat back in his chair, and I saw his expression change. The false concern vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Evelyn, I'm trying to have a reasonable conversation with you. I'm trying to give you options. But if you're not willing to be flexible, then we're going to have a problem. I'm not unwilling to be flexible. I'm unwilling to give up the work I love because of assumptions about what someone my age can or can't do. They're not assumptions. They're statistics. Statistics don't drive buses, Mr. Whitfield. People do. And I'm a damn good driver. The curse word hung in the air between us. I rarely cursed, and never at work. But something in me had cracked, just slightly not broken, but cracked enough to let the truth leak through. Marcus's jaw tightened. I think we're done here. Yes, sir. I believe we are. I stood and walked out of his office with my head high, even though my legs felt shaky. I made it to the stairwell before I had to stop and lean against the wall, my breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with the stairs. He was going to fire me. The knowledge settled into my bones with cold certainty. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He was building his case, documenting his concerns, creating a paper trail that would justify removing a 63-year-old diabetic driver who'd become inflexible and defensive. I thought about calling Samuel. I thought about going home and crying into my pillow. I thought about a lot of things. Instead, I went back to the depot, climbed into my bus, and drove my evening route with the same care and precision I'd shown for 30 years, because that's what you do when someone's trying to take away your dignity. You hold on to it harder. Mrs. Patterson got on at her usual stop. I gave her the extra seconds to settle herself. Carlos gave me his usual nod. I nodded back. Lisa looked up from her flashcards and smiled at me, and I smiled back even though my heart was breaking. These were my people. This was my purpose, and Marcus Whitfield was not going to take it from me without a fight. When I got home that night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old photo album and flipped through 30 years of memories. There was Roosevelt, gruff and solid, on my first day. There were pictures from company picnics and holiday parties. There were commendations and safety awards and thank you cards from passengers whose lives I'd touched. I found the card Lisa had given me last Christmas. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. You inspire me every day." I set the card on my kitchen table where I could see it, and I made myself a promise. Whatever happened next, I would not let them make me small. I would not let them erase 30 years of service with their statistics and their risk management and their modernization. I was Evelyn Johnson. I was a bus driver, and I mattered. December came in cold, the kind of cold that settled into your joints and stayed there, reminding you of every year you'd lived. I felt it in my knees when I climbed into the driver's seat each morning, felt it in my hands when I gripped the wheel, but I didn't let it slow me down, couldn't afford to. The depot had become a different place. Where there used to be laughter in the break room, now there was just tension. Where there used to be camaraderie, now there was suspicion. Marcus's regime had turned us into competitors, each of us trying to prove we deserved our seat more than the person next to us. I hated what it had done to us, what it had done to me. I found myself checking the mirror more often, looking for the supervisor cars that might be following my route. Found myself second-guessing decisions I'd made instinctively for 3 decades. Should I wait for that person running for the stop, or pull away and stay on schedule? Should I chat with the regulars, or maintain silence to avoid any possibility of a complaint about unprofessionalism? Marcus was getting what he wanted. He was making me afraid. Samuel noticed. Of course, he noticed. He was my son. "Ma, you're not eating," he said one Sunday at dinner. His wife Monica had made pot roast, my favorite, but I'd barely touched it. "I'm eating." "You've moved the food around your plate." "That's not eating." Monica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Evelyn, honey, we're worried about you. You've lost weight. You look exhausted. And Samuel says you're calling him at 2 in the morning just to talk." I'd forgotten about those calls. Or maybe I'd convinced myself they were normal, that it was normal to wake at 2 a.m. with anxiety sitting on your chest like a stone. Normal to need to hear your child's voice to remember you weren't alone. "It's just work stress," I said. "It'll pass." "It's not passing. It's getting worse." Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "Ma, I love you. And because I love you, I need to say this. It's not worth it. Whatever they're doing to you, whatever you're trying to prove, it's not worth your health. You think I should quit? I think you should prioritize yourself for once in your life. You've given 30 years to that company. You don't owe them another minute." It's not about what I owe them. It's about I stopped trying to find words for something I barely understood myself. When I get behind that wheel, when I drive those streets, when I look in the mirror and see my passengers, that's when I know who I am. Without that, I'm just an old woman waiting to die. The silence that followed was profound. Monica's eyes filled with tears. Samuel looked down at his plate. "You're more than your job, Ma," he said quietly. "You're my mother. You're Monica's mother. You're a friend, a neighbor, a member of your church. You're a woman with dreams and interests and value that has nothing to do with driving a bus. But that's who I am." "No, that's what you do. Those are 2 different things." I wanted to argue with him, wanted to explain that for people like me, black women who'd fought for every inch of respect we'd ever received, what we did and who we were couldn't be separated so our work was our identity because society had spent centuries telling us we were only worth what we could produce. But I was too tired to explain, too tired to fight, so I just nodded and tried to eat my pot roast, and pretended I didn't see the way Samuel and Monica exchanged worried glances over my bent head. The next day, Tuesday, started with freezing rain, the kind of weather that made driving treacherous, that turned every stop into a potential accident, that tested even the most experienced drivers. I drove with extra caution, giving myself more distance between vehicles, slowing for every turn, watching for black ice on the bridges. At 8:37 a.m., as I was pulling away from the Edgewood Avenue stop, I saw him in my rearview mirror, a man running for the bus, waving his arm. He was maybe 40 yards back when I'd started pulling away. But he was sprinting hard, desperation in every stride. I had a choice to make. The schedule said I should keep going. I was already 2 minutes behind due to the weather, but the next bus wouldn't come for 30 minutes, and it was freezing rain. And this man was running like his life depended on catching this ride. I stopped, let him board. Thank you so much," he gasped, out of breath, water streaming down his face. "My daughter's in the hospital. I need to get to Grady." Thank you. You're welcome, honey. Catch your breath. I didn't think anything of it. It was what any decent human being would do. But I didn't see the supervisor car parked half a block down, didn't see the man inside marking something on his clipboard. 3 days later, I was called into Marcus's office again. This time he wasn't alone. The HR woman whose name I'd learned was Sharon sat in the corner with her laptop open. A witness. This was official. Evelyn, thank you for coming in. Marcus's voice was cool, professional. I need to discuss a serious issue that's come to our attention. My stomach dropped. Yes, sir. On Tuesday, December 10th, at approximately 8:37 a.m., you deviated from protocol. You were observed stopping your vehicle to pick up a passenger who was not present at the designated stop when you arrived. This caused you to fall further behind schedule and violated our operational guidelines. The man with the sick daughter, of course, sir. That passenger was running for the bus. He was visible when I arrived at the stop. His daughter was in the hospital. The reason for his travel is irrelevant. What's relevant is that you made an unauthorized stop that impacted your schedule. You were already 2 minutes behind. This added another 45 seconds. 45 seconds to help someone get to their sick child. 45 seconds that violated protocol. Marcus slid a document across his desk. This is your second documented performance issue this quarter. The first was the November 8th incident where you engaged in an extended conversation with a passenger, causing a 1-minute delay. I remembered that Mrs. Patterson had been crying because her sister had died. I'd taken 60 seconds to offer condolences and make sure she was okay. 60 seconds of human compassion, now being used as evidence of my incompetence. Mr. Whitfield, I've been driving for 30 years without a single accident, without a single injury to a passenger, without your historical record is not in question. Your current performance is. He tapped the document. You're being placed on formal probation. 90 days. During that time, any additional performance issues will result in immediate termination. No exceptions. The room tilted slightly. Probation. After 30 years of perfect service, I was being put on probation for showing kindness to people in need. Do you understand, Evelyn? Sharon asked from her corner, her fingers poised over her keyboard, ready to record my response. I understand, I managed. Good sign here. Acknowledging receipt of the probation notice. I signed. What choice did I have? When I walked out of that office, I felt something inside me shift. Not brick high was too stubborn for that but shift. Like a foundation that had stood for decades, suddenly discovering a crack it hadn't known was there. I made it to my bus, started the engine, began my route. At every stop, I felt the weight of being watched. Every decision, wait or go, chat or stay silent, help or adhere to protocol, became fraught with danger. At the Georgia Tech stop, a student dropped her phone. It skittered under a seat. She looked at me, panicked, knowing she was holding up the bus. The old me would have said, "Go ahead, honey, grab it quick." The new me, the one on probation, the one Marcus was building a case against, Jessit sat silent and waited while she scrambled for it. My jaw clenched, hating myself. Lisa got on at her usual stop. She sat down, pulled out her flashcards, but I felt her watching me in the window's reflection. After a few minutes, she got up and came to stand beside my seat, holding the rail. "Miss Evelyn, what happened?" "Nothing, baby. Everything's fine. You haven't smiled once today. You always smile." I kept my eyes on the road. "Just tired." "It's more than tired." She was quiet for a moment. "They're doing it to you too, aren't they? What they did to the others." I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because if I started talking about it, I might start crying, and I couldn't afford to cry. Not here. Not now. My grandmother used to say that some people see dignity as a threat. Lisa said softly, they can't stand watching someone do their job with pride and skill, especially if that person looks like us. So they find ways to strip that dignity away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the shell of who you used to be. Your grandmother was wise. She was, and you know what else she told me? She said the only way they win is if you let them make you forget who you are. Lisa went back to her seat, but her words stayed with me for the rest of my shift, for the rest of that week. For all the days that followed. At night, I lay in bed and felt the weight of every one of my 63 years, felt the diabetes I managed, the blood pressure I monitored, the arthritis in my knees, felt all the ways my body was aging, all the ways Marcus was right about biology and time and decline. But I also felt something else, something stubborn and unbreakable, forged through decades of being underestimated and overlooked and dismissed, something that refused to go quietly into whatever future Marcus Whitfield had planned for me. I thought about Roosevelt, about that first day, about carrying people's lives. I thought about Mrs. Patterson's grateful smile, about Carlos's daily nod, about Lisa's admiration. I thought about the man with the daughter in the hospital, who'd made it to Grady because I'd waited 45 seconds, and I decided something. If Marcus wanted to fire me, he'd have to actually fire me. I wouldn't quit, wouldn't retire, wouldn't make it easy for him by disappearing the way he wanted me to. I would show up, do the work, follow every rule while remembering what the work was really about. I would be Evelyn Johnson, bus driver, until the very last moment they pried the wheel from my hands, because that's who I was, that's who I'd always been, and nobody, not Marcus, not time, not fear, was going to take that from me. January 15th was a Wednesday. I remember because it was exactly 1 month into my probation, and I'd been counting days like a prisoner marking walls. 1 month of perfect performance, 1 month of robotic precision, of following every rule to the letter, of sacrificing kindness for compliance. Thought it was destroying me from the inside out. The morning started normally enough, temperature in the mid-30s, overcast but dry. I did my pre-trip inspection, filled out my logbook, checked my blood sugar 124, slightly elevated but manageable. I was running my usual route, the 47th path I could drive in my sleep. Morning rush hour meant the bus was packed, standing room only by the time I reached the Auburn Avenue stop. I watched in my mirrors as passengers pressed together, holding rails and straps, swaying with the movement of the bus. Among them, I saw my regulars, Mrs. Patterson with her church clothes and tired eyes, Carlos with his earbuds and backpack, Lisa with her nursing textbooks balanced on her knees. At 8:42 a.m., as I was approaching the intersection of Peachtree and North Avenue, I saw the light turn yellow. I was maybe 60 feet back, traveling at exactly the speed limit, 35 miles per hour. I had a choice: accelerate slightly and make the light, or brake and stop. The old me would have trusted my instinct. The new me, the one on probation, the one being watched, chose caution. I braked. That's when I felt it. The subtle pull to the right, the way the steering wheel resisted just slightly in my hands. Something wasn't right with the front passenger tire. I'd done my pre-trip inspection. The tires had looked fine, but something had changed in the 2 hours since I'd checked a slow leak. Maybe, or a nail I'd picked up somewhere along the route. Whatever it was, I needed to pull over and check it. But I was on Peachtree Street during rush hour. There was no shoulder, no safe place to stop. The next official stop was 3 blocks away, at the Ponce de Leon intersection. I could make it 3 blocks. I eased off the brake, started forward when the light turned green, keeping my speed low, feeling the pull in the steering, calculating distances and risks in my head the way 30 years of experience had taught me. That's when the 18-wheeler appeared. It came from my left, from North Avenue, running the red light that had just changed. I saw it in my peripheral vision, a massive truck, its trailer loaded with something that made it sit low and heavy, and it was moving too fast. Way too fast for a vehicle that size in downtown traffic. Time did what it always does in moments of crisis. It expanded and contracted simultaneously. I saw everything at once. The truck jackknifing as the driver realized his mistake and slammed the brakes. The trailer swinging wide, the inevitable physics of mass and momentum and friction. I saw the pedestrians on the corner frozen in horror. I saw the cars in front of me trying to accelerate out of danger. I saw my passengers in the mirror, oblivious to what was coming, and I knew, with the absolute certainty that comes from 3 decades behind a wheel, that if I followed protocol, if I did what the manual said to do in an emergency situation, we were all going to die. The manual said to brake, brake hard, hold the wheel straight, minimize damage, but braking would mean the trailer would T-bone us, would slice through the bus like it was made of paper, would kill everyone on the right side, including the young mother with the infant in a carrier that I'd watched board 10 minutes ago. I had maybe 2 seconds to decide, maybe less. I cranked the wheel hard right and punched the accelerator. The bus lurched forward and right, tires screaming, the pull from the damaged tire fighting against me. I heard passengers cry out, heard the sound of bothes stumbling, someone falling, but I kept my foot down, kept the wheel turned, threading the bus through a gap that wasn't quite wide enough, that shouldn't have existed, that only 30 years of knowing exactly how wide your vehicle is, and exactly how fast you can push it, would allow you to attempt. The trailer passed behind us. So close I felt the wind displacement rock the bus. So close I could hear the squeal of its own brakes, the sound of its load shifting. So close that if I'd been 1 second slower, 1 foot less precise, we'd have been nothing but a headline. Then, we were through. We were past the intersection, and I was pulling to the right, finally stopping, finally letting myself breathe. The silence lasted maybe 3 heartbeats. Then chaos. Passengers rushing forward, their voices overlapping, shock and adrenaline, making them loud. Someone was crying, someone else was shouting into a phone, probably calling 911. I heard my name being called out, Miss Evelyn, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. My hands were still on the wheel. They were shaking now, trembling so badly I couldn't make them stop. My heart was hammering in my chest, and my breath was coming in short, sharp gasps that made my chest hurt. I'd saved them. I'd saved all of them, and I'd violated every protocol in the book to do it. Lisa appeared beside my seat, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "Don't move," she said. "Just breathe. You're in shock." "I'm fine." I managed, though I clearly wasn't. "You saved us," she said. "You understand that. That truck would have killed us. You saved everyone on this bus." Behind her, I could see passengers pulling out their phones, recording. Some of them were probably like. In the distance, I heard sirens, police, ambulance, fire trucks responding to the intersection behind us. A young man in scrubs pushed forward. "I'm a paramedic," he said. "Ma'am, I need to check you out." "I'm fine." "You're shaking. Your pupils are dilated. You're showing signs of acute stress response. Please, let me help you." I let him check my pulse, my blood pressure, my blood sugar. Let him shine a light in my eyes and ask me questions about what day it was, who the president was. Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered everything correctly, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The police arrived, then the supervisors, then, inevitably, Marcus. He looked at the scene, the stopped bus, the damaged tire, the passengers giving statements to police, the emergency vehicles blocking Peachtree Street. He looked at me, still sitting in the driver's seat, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not concern, not relief that everyone was safe. Something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I need you to step off the bus." I stood on shaking legs and followed him to his car, parked half a block away. The paramedic tried to object I should go to the hospital, get checked out properly, but Marcus assured him I'd be taken care of. We sat in his car, and he pulled out his tablet, already pulling up reports. "According to the preliminary report, you accelerated through an intersection while under an emergency vehicle approach," he said. "You took evasive action that endangered passengers. Several reported falling or being injured. You continued driving on a damaged tire for 3 blocks before stopping. I saved their lives. You violated protocol, multiple protocols." He looked at me, and there was no satisfaction on his face now, just cold determination. "Evelyn, I understand you thought you were doing the right thing, but we have procedures for a reason. You should have stopped immediately when you felt the tire issue. You should have maintained your position when the truck appeared. The accident investigation will determine fault. But you've made decisions that went against your training and put passengers at risk. At risk. I got them out of the way of a jackknifing 8. You endangered them with erratic driving. Several passengers are reporting minor injuries from your sudden acceleration and turn. One elderly gentleman may have a broken wrist from falling. The elderly gentleman. I'd felt the bus lurch, heard the commotion. In my desperate attempt to save lives, I'd hurt someone. Mr. Whitfield, I had 2 seconds to make a choice. If I'd followed protocol, we'd all be dead. That's speculation. The truck driver was already braking. His trailer may have missed us entirely. May have. I heard my voice rising, felt the last threads of my professional composure snapping. I've been driving for 30 years. I know what I saw. I know what would have happened. And I made a choice to save my passengers, instead of following your damn manual. Marcus's expression hardened. "This conversation is over. You're suspended pending investigation. Turn in your keys and your badge." The words hit like physical blows. Suspended. After 30 years. After saving 37 lives, I was being suspended. "You've been looking for a reason," I said quietly. "Since the day you walked into this company, you've been looking for a reason to get rid of me, and now you think you have one. This isn't personal, Evelyn. This is about safety and compliance. It's always personal when someone decides you're not worth keeping. Around I reached for my keys, my bus keys that I'd carried for 3 decades, and placed them in his hand. They felt heavier than they should have, like I was handing over more than just pieces of metal. "I'll need your badge too," Marcus said. I unpinned it from my shirt. The name tag that said Evelyn Johnson driver in block letters. I'd worn it with pride for so long it had left a small indentation in the fabric of every uniform I owned. I handed it over and got out of the car. Behind me, passengers were still gathered around my bus, some giving statements, some just standing in shock. I saw Lisa watching me, saw her understand what had just happened, saw her eyes fill with angry tears. I walked past them all, past the police and the paramedics and the supervisors, past the bus I'd driven for the last 8 years, past everything that had defined my life for 3 decades. I walked to the MARTA station and took the train home, because I no longer had the right to drive a bus. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and let myself feel it all. The fear that I'd suppressed during the crisis, the adrenaline crash that made my whole body ache, the fury at Marcus for twisting my heroism into failure, the grief for a career that was ending not with honor but with suspension. And underneath it all, the terrible doubt: what if he was right? What if I had been reckless? What if the elderly gentleman's broken wrist was my fault, not the truck driver's? What if my 30 years of experience had made me overconfident, made me think I could bend reality to my will? What if I was too old for this after all? My phone rang. Samuel. Someone must have told him. Ma, I heard. "Are you okay?" "I'm home. I'm fine. I'm coming over." "You don't need to. I'm already in the car." He arrived 20 minutes later. Monica with him, both of them looking worried and angry in equal measure. They held me while I finally let myself cry. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside me. "They're saying you're a hero," Monica said after I'd cried myself empty. "It's all over social media. Someone live-streamed the whole thing. There are videos from inside the bus showing exactly what happened. Evelyn, the whole city is calling you a hero." I looked at her, not understanding. She pulled out her phone and showed me Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of them filled with videos and posts about the Atlanta bus driver who saved 37 lives. Hashtag hero driver was trending. News stations were picking up the story, and in every video, you could see exactly what I'd seen: the truck jackknifing, the impossible gap, the split-second decision that saved us all. "They're trying to fire a hero," Samuel said, his voice hard. "They're going to regret this." But I wasn't thinking about revenge or regret. I was thinking about how the truth looks different depending on where you're standing. From Marcus's position, I was a problematic old driver who'd violated protocol. From the passenger's position, I was a hero who'd saved their lives. Both things were true. Neither was complete. I was just a woman who'd done her job the best way she knew how, and was being punished for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. The investigation would take weeks, maybe months. My savings would run out. My purpose had been stripped away, and I didn't know if I had the strength to fight anymore. The videos went viral overnight. By Thursday morning, Atlanta hero driver had been viewed 17 million times. By Friday, news vans were parked outside my house. I didn't watch the videos at first. Couldn't bring myself to relive those seconds, to see from outside what I'd experienced from inside. But Samuel insisted. Pulled up the clearest one on his laptop while Monica made coffee in my kitchen. The video had been filmed by the young man in scrubs. The paramedic. His hands were shaking. You could see it in the unsteady footage, but he'd captured everything. The truck jack, the trailer swinging wide, my bus accelerating and turning, threading through that impossible gap with inches to spare. The trailer passing so close behind us you could see the rust on its panels. Then the aftermath. Passengers rushing forward, their faces showing shock and relief and gratitude. Someone had caught the moment when Lisa knelt beside my seat, when the paramedic checked my vitals, when my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold the wheel steady anymore. And they'd caught the ending too. Marcus arriving, taking me aside, me handing over my keys and badge. You couldn't hear our conversation, but you could read the body language. His cold authority, my devastated dignity. The comments section was on fire. That woman saved everyone on that bus and they fired her. This is what's wrong with corporate America. Punish the heroes, protect the spreadsheets. She's 63 and has better reflexes than drivers half her age. This is age discrimination, plain and simple. I ride the 47 every day. Miss Evelyn is the best driver in Atlanta. This is wrong. The local news picked it up first, then CNN, then it spread to national networks, morning shows, evening broadcasts. Everyone wanted to interview me. Everyone wanted my story. Everyone wanted to turn my crisis into content. I said no to all of them. Didn't want to be a spectacle. Didn't want my pain packaged into 3-minute segments between commercials for car insurance and antidepressants. But I couldn't control the narrative. Lisa gave an interview to WSB-TV, standing at the bus stop in her scrubs, her voice passionate and clear. Miss Evelyn has been driving that route for years. She knows every passenger, knows their stops, knows their stories. She calls us honey and baby and makes us feel safe. And when that truck came at us, she didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She did exactly what her 30 years of experience told her to do, and she saved all of our lives. And now they're trying to destroy her career because she didn't follow some manual written by people who've never driven a bus in their lives. The elderly man with the broken wrist, his name was Robert Chungavane, interview to standing in his living room with his arm in a cast. He looked directly at the camera. I fell when the bus turned, broke my wrist in 2 places, and I would break it 100 more times if it meant living through what would have happened if Miss Evelyn hadn't done what she did. That truck would have killed me, would have killed my daughter who was sitting next to me. Anyone who says she was wrong, anyone who wants to punish her, they don't understand what we saw, what we felt. She's a hero, period. The pressure built like steam in a closed valve. Social media erupted with hashtag Save Miss Evelyn and hashtag Justice for Evelyn. A Change.org petition demanding my reinstatement got 200,000 signatures in 48 hours. The union, which had been mostly useless up until now, suddenly found its voice, issuing statements about unfair treatment and calling for an independent investigation. And through it all, I sat in my house and tried to figure out who I was without my bus. The suspension meant no pay. I had savings, but not much. My pension wouldn't fully vest until I turned 6. Social Security wouldn't be enough to live on. The math was simple and terrifying. I needed this job, but more than that, I needed the job to need me, needed to matter, needed to wake up with purpose, instead of dread. Samuel came over every day, brought groceries, cooked meals I barely touched, sat with me while I stared at walls. He didn't say, "I told you so," though he had every right to. He just held my hand and told me it would be okay, even though neither of us believed it. On the 5th day of my suspension, while I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to make my savings stretch through an uncertain future, my doorbell rang. It was Lisa. She was still in her scrubs, must have come straight from a shift end. Her eyes were red from crying, or lack of sleep, or both. "Miss Evelyn," she said, "can I come in?" I made tea. We sat at my table, and she pulled papers from her backpack. "I've been organizing," she said. "Me and some of the other regular passengers, we've reached out to civil rights attorneys, disability advocates, age discrimination specialists. We have people ready to fight this. Lisa, honey, I appreciate it, but nothing. You saved our lives, and now we're going to save your career." She spread the papers across my table. Legal documents, contact information, time. We have video evidence showing the truck driver ran a red light. We have expert testimony from traffic engineers saying your maneuver was the only safe option. We have 37 passengers willing to testify that you acted heroically. We have your 30-year perfect record. We have everything we need to prove this suspension is unjust. I looked at her young face, her fierce determination, and felt something crack inside me, not break, crack open, like a shell that had been holding something precious and secret. And now that secret was being revealed. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Because you matter. Because every day for 3 years, I've watched you treat every single person who gets on your bus with respect and kindness. I've watched you wait for the elderly, help the disabled, smile at children, remember names. I've watched you do a job that most people think is simple and low-skilled. And I've watched you do it with more dignity and grace than most people bring to anything in their lives." She reached across the table and took my hands. "My grandmother drove a bus during the Montgomery bus boycott. Did you know that after Rosa Parks, after the boycott started, Black drivers were hired to drive Black passengers? My grandmother was one of them. And she told me stories about how white people would spit at her, throw things, call her names. But she kept driving, kept showing up, kept treating every passenger with dignity because that was her resistance. Her way of saying, I'm human, I matter. and you can't take that from me. Lisa's tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. When I watch you drive, Miss Evelyn, I see my grandmother. I see that same quiet resistance, that same dignity, and I'm not going to let them take it from you the way they tried to take it from her. I cried then, really cried. Not the desperate, broken sobs from the other night, but something deeper, something that felt like grief and gratitude mixed together, because someone saw me, really saw me, not as an old woman who needed protecting, not as a liability to be managed, not as a statistic in Marcus Whitfield's efficiency reports, as a person who mattered. Okay, I said, when I could speak again. Okay, tell me what we need to do. Lisa smiled through her tears and pulled out more papers. We spent the next 3 hours going through everything: timelines, witness statements, legal options. She'd organized the passengers into a formal group, created a legal fund, contacted media outlets. She'd done in 5 days what would have taken me months to figure out. There's something else, she said as she was gathering her papers to leave. There's going to be a protest tomorrow at the depot. Passengers, union members, community activists, people who believe what happened to you was wrong. A protest, a peaceful one. We're calling it Stand with Evelyn. We want to show the company that you're not alone, that this community values you. She paused. We'd like you to be there, if you're comfortable with it. I wasn't comfortable with it. Wasn't comfortable being the center of attention, being the cause people rallied around. But I thought about Lisa's grandmother, about Rosa Parks, about all the women who'd been uncomfortable and scared and showed up anyway. I'll be there, I said. Samuel nearly had a heart attack when I told him, Ma, you're on suspension. They could use this against you. Say you're being insubordinate or trying to create negative publicity. They've already taken my job, baby. What else can they take? Your pension, your benefits, your reputation. My reputation. I looked at him, this man I'd raised to be careful and practical and safe. Son, my reputation is the only thing they haven't touched. Every passenger on that bus knows who I am. Every person who's ridden my route for 30 years knows who I am. Marcus Whitfield and his spreadsheets don't get to define my reputation. Monica, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. She's right, Samuel. Sometimes you have to stand up, even when it's scary. He looked between us, his protective instincts warring with his understanding that I needed this. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but I'm coming with you. I wouldn't have it any other way. The protest was scheduled for Saturday morning, 9 a.m., outside the depot. I barely slept Friday night, kept imagining all the ways it could go wrong. What if nobody showed up? What if Marcus used it against me? What if I stood there alone, one old woman against a corporation, and proved him right about me being too old, too stubborn, too much trouble? But when Samuel and I arrived at the depot at 8:45 a.m., I saw a crowd. At least 300 people, maybe more. Passengers I recognized from my route holding signs that said Hero Driver and 30 years of service matters. Union members in their official vests, community organizers with megaphones, news cameras from every local station. And in the front, wearing matching blue t-shirts with my face printed on them, stood Lisa and a group of my regular passengers. Mrs. Patterson was there, despite her arthritis. Carlos was there. No earbuds for once. Robert Chen was there with his cast. His daughter beside him, the young paramedic who'd filmed everything, was there in uniform. They saw me and started cheering. I stood there, frozen, overwhelmed by the sight of so many people who'd come out in the cold January morning to stand up for me. Samuel squeezed my hand. Seema, you matter. Lisa ran up to us, breathless with excitement. Miss Evelyn, we've had people calling all morning wanting to join. The news is covering it live. And look, she pointed to a group of older drivers. Men and women in their 50s and 60s, all wearing their uniforms. Tom Rodriguez was there, Derek, Maria, all the veterans who'd been watching Marcus systematically push them out, too afraid to speak up for themselves but willing to speak up for me. We're with you, Evelyn, Tom called out. All the way, a woman with a megaphone, one of the union organizers, started speaking. Her voice carried across the crowd and into the depot. We are here today to stand with Evelyn Johnson, a driver who has served this community with distinction for 30 years. A driver who saved 37 lives and is being punished for her heroism. We are here to say that experience matters, that dignity matters, that Black women who do their jobs with excellence deserve respect, not discrimination. The crowd roared approval. Inside the depot, I could see faces in the windows, other drivers, mechanics, supervisors, watching. Some looked sympathetic, others uncomfortable. I wondered if Marcus was in there, watching this display of support for a woman he'd tried to quietly remove. The speeches continued. Lisa spoke about her grandmother and about witnessing heroism. Robert Chen spoke about being alive because of my skill. A civil rights attorney spoke about patterns of age discrimination in the transit industry. A city councilwoman spoke about the need for investigations into management practices. And then Lisa called my name. Miss Evelyn Johnson is here with us today. Miss Evelyn, would you like to say something? Every camera turned toward me. Every face in that crowd looked at me expectantly. Samuel whispered, "You don't have to, Ma." But I did have to, because these people had shown up for me, because Lisa's grandmother had driven through spit and slurs, because Roosevelt had told me I was carrying people's lives, and that made me essential. I walked to the front, and Lisa handed me the megaphone. My hands were shaking, seemed like they were always shaking these days, but I held it steady enough. "I don't have a fancy speech prepared," I began, and my voice sounded strange, amplified like that. "I'm not a politician or an organizer, I'm just a bus driver. Or I was, until 5 days ago." The crowd was silent, listening. For 30 years, I've driven the 47 route. I've driven through snowstorms and heat waves, through morning rush and late nights, through good days and hard days. I've driven because it's what I'm good at, because it matters, because every person who gets on my bus is trusting me with something precious, their safety, their time, their lives. I paused, feeling the weight of all those eyes on me. Last Wednesday, I made a choice. I saw danger coming, and I used every bit of skill and experience I have to protect my passengers. I would make that same choice again, every single time, because that's what you do when you're responsible for people's lives. You protect them, even if it means breaking rules written by people who've never sat in a driver's seat. The crowd applauded, but I kept going. But this isn't just about me. This is about every worker who gets pushed out because they're the wrong age, the wrong color, the wrong gender. This is about every person who does their job with pride and skill and gets treated like they're disposable. This is about dignity. My voice cracked on that last word. I'm 63 years old. I have diabetes and arthritis and reading glasses. I'm not perfect, but I'm good at what I do, and I deserve to keep doing it until I decide I'm ready to stop. Not when some executive with a spreadsheet decides I'm not worth keeping around. The applause was louder now, mixed with cheers and shouts of support. So I'm standing here today to say, I'm not going quietly. I'm not retiring early, or accepting a settlement, or disappearing the way they want me to. I'm fighting, and I'm grateful, so grateful that you're all willing to fight with me. I handed the megaphone back to Lisa, and the crowd surged forward, people wanting to shake my hand, to hug me, to tell me their own stories of being pushed out or overlooked or undervalued. I listened to every one, remembered as many names as I could, because that's what you do. You see people, you honor their stories. The protests lasted 3 hours. By the time it ended, the news coverage was national. #StandWithEvelyn was trending worldwide. The company's phone lines were jammed with calls demanding my reinstatement. The mayor's office issued a statement calling for a thorough investigation. And Marcus Whitfield, sitting in his glass office, had to realize that I wasn't just an old woman he could quietly dispose of. I was a symbol of resistance, of dignity, of the simple truth that experience and skill and dedication matter. That night, exhausted but feeling more alive than I had in months, I sat with Samuel and Monica in my living room. "What happens now?" Samuel asked. "Now we wait for the investigation, wait for the company to make their next move." I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in weeks. But I'm not waiting passively. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Because I'd found something I'd been missing. Not just support, not just solidarity, but certainty. Certainty that I'd done the right thing, that I was the right person for this job, that my 30 years of experience was worth something real. They could take my keys and my badge. They could suspend me, investigate me, try to force me out. But they couldn't take away who I was. I was Evelyn Johnson. I was a bus driver, and I was going to fight for the right to keep being both. The investigation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of lawyers and depositions and expert testimony. 6 weeks of living off my savings while Samuel tried to slip me money I was too proud to accept. 6 weeks of watching the news cover my story like it belonged to them instead of to me. But things were happening. Things I couldn't see from my kitchen table. The truck driver, a man named Dennis Howard, admitted in his deposition that he'd run the red light, said he'd been distracted, checking his GPS, trying to make up time on a delivery schedule that was already impossible. His company was facing massive liability. They needed someone to blame. And I'd given them an alternative narrative. If only the bus driver had followed protocol, their driver's mistake wouldn't have mattered so much. But the videos didn't lie. Traffic engineers reviewed the footage and testified that my maneuver was the only viable option. Following standard protocol braking and holding position would have resulted in a catastrophic collision with probable fatalities. The gap I'd threaded through existed for approximately 1.3 seconds. My acceleration and turn were executed with precision that, in their words, demonstrated exceptional skill and judgment. The elderly man's broken wrist, the investigation showed it happened when another passenger fell into him, not from my driving itself. Robert Chen testified that he didn't blame me, had never blamed me, and resented his injury being used as evidence of recklessness. The damaged tire, maintenance records showed it had passed inspection that morning, but the valve stem was faulty, a manufacturing defect that caused a slow leak. I should have felt it sooner, maybe, but given the circumstances, my decision to continue to the next safe stopping point was deemed reasonable. Every piece of evidence vindicated me. Every witness supported me. Every expert agreed I'd saved lives. But Marcus Whitfield wasn't giving up easily. He argued that the outcome didn't excuse the protocol violations, that allowing drivers to make judgment calls in crisis situations set a dangerous precedent, that my age was a factor in my elevated stress response, as evidenced by my shaking hands and elevated blood pressure after the incident. He was trying to twist my humanity, my natural physical response to nearly die into evidence of incompetence. The union fought back hard. So did the lawyers Lisa had connected me with. So did the city council members who'd gotten involved, and the civil rights organizations who'd taken up my case. The pressure mounted until the company had to make a choice: stand by their director's decision to suspend a hero driver, or admit they'd made a mistake. On February 28th, exactly 6 weeks after the incident, I got a phone call from the company's CEO, not Marcus's boss, a man named Richard Peterson who worked out of the corporate headquarters in New York and probably hadn't thought about Atlanta operations in years. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice carrying the careful politeness of someone who'd been coached by lawyers, "I want to personally inform you that the investigation into the January 15th incident has been completed. The findings support your account of events and confirm that your actions prevented a catastrophic accident. Your suspension is lifted immediately, and you're cleared to return to work." I sat at my kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, and felt nothing. No relief, no joy, just a hollow sort of exhaustion. "Mrs. Johnson, did you hear me?" "I heard you, Mr. Peterson. We'd like you to return to work as soon as possible, Monday, if you're available." "And Mr. Whitfield?" There was a pause. "Mr. Whitfield's employment situation is being reviewed, but I can assure you that moving forward, your performance will be evaluated fairly and without bias." Without bias, as if the last 6 months hadn't happened, as if they could just erase the fear and humiliation and systematic destruction of my dignity with one phone call and an assurance. "I'll need to think about it," I said. Another pause, longer, this time. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand you've been through a difficult experience, but you've been cleared. There's nothing standing in the way of your return. Except that I need to decide if I want to work for a company that treated me this way in the first place." I heard him inhale sharply. "Mrs. Johnson, I'll call you back with my decision," I said, and hung up before he could respond. Samuel, who'd been listening from the doorway, came and sat across from me. "What are you thinking, Ma?" "I'm thinking about Roosevelt, about my first day, 30 years ago, about how young I was, how scared, how determined to prove myself, about how much I loved that job before it became a fight." "Do you still love it?" That was the question, wasn't it? Did I still love driving? Or had Marcus Whitfield poisoned it for me? Had the fear and surveillance and constant evaluation turned something beautiful into something bitter? I thought about my passengers, about Mrs. Patterson's grateful smile and Carlos's daily nod and Lisa's admiration. I thought about the rhythm of the route, the feel of the wheel in my hands, the satisfaction of getting 37 people safely to their destinations. I thought about carrying people's lives, and what that meant, and whether I was ready to give it up. "Yeah," I said finally, "I still love it." "Then go back, but go back on your terms." He was right. I'd fought too hard to go back and pretend everything was fine. If I was going to drive again, it needed to mean something. I called the union rep, a woman named Patricia who'd been fighting for me since day one. What leverage do we have? I asked. More than you think. The publicity has been incredible. The company's stock took a hit when this went public. Turns out investors don't like seeing corporations bully elderly black women who save lives. The mayor's office is watching. Civil rights groups are watching. And you have about 1 million people on social media ready to boycott the entire transit system if they mistreat you again. So what do I ask for? What do you want? I thought about that. What did I want? An apology. Money. Marcus's job. No. I wanted something simpler and harder to achieve. I want respect, I said. Real respect. Not just for me, but for every driver who's been targeted. I want the evaluation system reviewed by an independent party. I want protections against age discrimination written into policy. I want the company to acknowledge publicly that they made a mistake. And I want Marcus Whitfield to look me in the eye and admit he was wrong. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, let's negotiate. The negotiations took another 2 weeks. The company agreed to most of my demands: the policy review, the anti-discrimination protections, the public acknowledgement. They balked at making Marcus apologize personally. Said it was inappropriate to mandate interpersonal interactions. I told them that was my line in the sand. If they wanted me back, Marcus had to face me. In the end, they agreed. On March 18th, I walked into the depot for the first time in 2 months. The place erupted in applause. Drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, even the supervisors who'd been watching me with suspicion for months, stood and clapped as I walked through. Some people cried. Tom Rodriguez hugged me so hard, he lifted me off my feet. "Welcome home, Evelyn," he whispered. Marcus's office was exactly as I remembered it. Glass walls, 2 large desks, framed certificates. But Marcus himself looked different, smaller, somehow diminished. The investigation had found him guilty of creating a hostile work environment, of selectively enforcing policies to target older workers, of prioritizing cost-cutting over safety and morale. He wasn't fired. Corporate America rarely fires people like Marcus, but he'd been demoted, moved to a different division, made to understand that his modernization crusade had failed. He stood when I entered, didn't offer to shake hands. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice stiff, "I've been instructed to apologize for the way your case was handled. The investigation found that my evaluation of the January 15th incident was influenced by bias. Your actions were heroic, and the suspension was unwarranted. I apologize." It was the most reluctant apology I'd ever heard. No emotion, no sincerity, just words he'd been legally required to say. "Thank you, Mr. Whitfield," I said evenly, "but I don't need your apology. I need you to understand something." He waited, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm 63 years old. I have diabetes and arthritis. I wear reading glasses, and my knees hurt on cold mornings. You looked at me and saw a liability, a problem to be solved, a number on a spreadsheet that didn't add up right. You saw all the things I can't do anymore, or might not be able to do soon." I stepped closer to his desk. "But you know what you didn't see? You didn't see 30 years of experience. You didn't see the instincts I've developed, the judgment I've earned, the relationships I've built. You didn't see that sometimes the people who've been doing something longest are the ones who understand it best. You saw my age as a weakness when it's actually my strength." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. "I'm not telling you this because I think you'll change. Men like you don't change. You'll go to your next job and you'll make the same calculations, value the same things, dismiss the same people. But I wanted you to know that you were wrong about me, and you were wrong about what matters." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Mr. Whitfield, that gap I drove through, it existed for 1.3 seconds. Your new drivers, the young ones with fast reflexes and perfect vision, not one of them could have done what I did, because reflexes aren't enough. You need wisdom, and wisdom takes time." I left him standing there and went to claim my bus.